One day, in 1979, director David Lynch took a break from editing his new film, The Elephant Man, and went to market to buy a mackerel. He took the fish home, cut it into 3 sections, head, torso, and tail, and placed them on a board. Around the pieces he wrote assembly instructions, the kind you'd find in a model airplane kit. He then took a photo and titled it Children's Fish Kit. Scrawled through the smeared blood and fish oil, the cheerful directions to place finished fish in water, watch your fish swim, are disquieting and for some reek of sarcasm. However, Lynch went on to make Chicken Kit, feathers not included, and Duck Kit, with unrealized plans for a Mouse Kit. Though he admits to their dumb humor, Lynch speaks of these kits in earnest. Well, it makes you think about things like, what makes this thing work? If you put them all together, you'd have a chicken, but what makes it walk around, you know? Given the effort involved, it's not fair to dismiss these kits as cheap gags. Indeed, they may hold a clue, if not a key, to unlocking deeper meaning in Lynch's art. By offering them as parts that can be dismantled, reassembled, and reactivated, Lynch presents these once-living animals as machines, and a great deal of dismantling, or dismembering, of living machines takes place in the director's work. The severed ear, discovered early in Blue Velvet, offers a challenge to its hero, Jeffrey, and to the audience. Put the pieces together and solve the mystery. Jeffrey's mission to reconnect the ear leads him on a journey of discovery. When the victim's head wound is finally revealed, it conjures our memory of the ear, and in our mind's eye, we splice the 2 gruesome close-ups together. In Wild at Heart, a feed store clerk has his hand shot off, and he and his also wounded partner crawl around on the floor looking for it. Their dialogue is straight out of a Lynch kit. They sew those things back on. Works good as new. I can't find it. Where is the damn thing? Tellingly, he calls it a thing instead of my hand, reducing himself to a collection of parts. They are like 2 auto mechanics looking for a needed screw that has dropped out of an engine. Meanwhile, the gunman, Bobby Peru, meets his own gruesome fate. A police officer shoots him repeatedly and, rather than return fire, Peru eerily decapitates himself with his own shotgun, dismantling his body in a dance of death. In Lynch's PlayStation 2 commercial, The Third Place, the seeker loses his head and arm, and in Twin Peaks The Return, Major Briggs suffers not only the indignity of decapitation, but has his head replaced with that of Ruth Davenport, their anatomies commingled as interchangeable parts. Henry Spencer is also decapitated in Eraserhead, and factory workers harvest his head to make pencil erasers, as the title foreshadows. The scene feels like a bizarre nightmare, but grows darker when one recalls that, a few decades before the film, real people were turned into lampshades. In Lost Highway, Renee's jealous husband, Fred, does not strangle or stab his unfaithful wife. Shockingly, he cuts her in 2. Like the infamous Black Dahlia victim, Renee's butchered corpse could be mistaken for a broken mannequin. Her husband has turned her into a wife kit. When these broken anatomies are reassembled in Lynch's world, the results are a hybrid of biology and mechanics, tissue and tubing, metal and membrane. Indeed, many species of biomechanoid creatures prowl Lynch's screens and canvases. The obviously mechanical Robin at the end of Blue Velvet, operated off-screen by the director, suggests a reassembled kit animal, its artificiality underscored by the real beetle writhing in its beak. Jeffrey's antagonist, Frank Booth, gets high with nitrous oxide, pulling a plastic mask and tube from beneath his clothing. The mechanism appears connected to him like an appendage. The drug, hissing from deep within Frank, is pumped through the umbilical tube and re-inhaled in a loop of addiction. Frank's umbilical anatomy recalls an untitled mixed-media piece Lynch painted in 1968 of a humanoid whose mouth is joined to his internal organs by a fleshy tube, an esophagus, a trachea, that resembles an elephant's trunk. A grid of actual spent cigarette filters, no doubt young David's, has been glued to the canvas and appears to hover in the dark space above the creature like stars in the sky. A portrait of the artist as a smoking machine. Now, around the time of this painting, Lynch also drew a series of mechanical women, and actress Grace Zabriskie resurrects them as the murderous Juana in Wild at Heart. Juana first appears as an intersecting double shadow on the wall. Dual light sources, probably a lamp in a window, confuse her outline, and in silhouette, her exoskeletal leg braces, coiled snaking phone cord, and cigarette fuse with her anatomy. By reducing her to a ghostly X-ray, Lynch erases the separations between metal, plastic, and flesh, giving her the contour of a mechanical, smoke-breathing insect. In a less menacing way, Alvin's cane and gripper are mechanical extensions of his failing body, as is his riding mower in Straight's story. Like Alvin Straight, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, in Lynch's adaptation of Dune, can move only with the aid of machines. Perhaps he desires to remake his human subjects in his own disfigured mechanical image, for the Baron plays the cruel games of a sadistic 10-year-old boy, slicing, stitching, and grafting everyone in sight, making them all into kits. His attendants' eyes and ears are sutured shut, perhaps a tyrant's effort to censor dissent. He has heart plugs universally installed so that anyone's blood can be drained as easily as engine fluid. The Baron makes a human cat kit out of Thufir Hawat, played by Freddie Jones, and a feline, interconnecting their organs to make them interdependent. With a more subtle approach, the Elephant Man also links humans to machines. Early on, Dr. Treves operates on a badly burned patient and observes, "We're seeing a lot more of these machine accidents." Set during the Industrial Revolution, the film has several scenes of workers operating ominous machines, their bodies engaging with the dangerous engines and taking on their repetitive, relentless rhythms. For Lynch, the mechanism is not an extension of the human body, but rather the inverse. Humans have become subservient to their machines. Eraserhead begins in a dark engine room where a man pulls 3 grudging levers one by one. These handles apparently control events in Henry's world, and each pull causes, first, a sperm-like organism to fly from Henry's open mouth, second, a luminous pool to appear in the darkness, and third, Henry's sperm to plunge into the pool. This sequence likely depicts the moment Henry impregnates his girlfriend Mary. The couple's desire is driven by an irresistible, all-powerful mechanism, their emotional and biological passion the mere grinding of gears, a new human life the product of industrial manufacture. And when he plays guitar, Ronnie Rocket is creatively fueled by high-voltage electricity flowing through his nervous system. Now, directors David Lynch and Stanley Kubrick were mutual admirers, and there's a scene in Kubrick's 2001 Space Odyssey in which 2 astronauts, Frank and Dave, discuss disconnecting the ship's onboard computer, HAL 9000. Dave says, "We'd have to cut his higher brain functions without disturbing the purely automatic and regulatory systems." As Dave says this, we see a mounted spacesuit and helmet, with the helmet elevated 3 inches above the suit's collar. The director subtly illustrates the mind-body separation they are planning for Hal. Now, Lynch does something similar in his films. Inanimate objects are repeatedly shown alongside organic beings for comparison, diagramming and highlighting their mechanical nature. Blue Velvet opens with Jeffrey's dad having a mysterious attack and collapsing in the front yard, and critics have speculated that the close-up of the king toes indicates that a blocked artery has caused a stroke. Later, when the coroner tells Jeffrey that the ear may have been cut off with scissors, we are shown a similar substitution. The scene cuts to scissors snipping police caution tape. At the film's climax, Jeffrey returns to Dorothy's apartment and is greeted by an uncanny tableau worthy of Edward Kienholz. The Yellow Man, or Detective Gordon, stands motionless, facing a bound, earless corpse, presumably the late Don Valens, while a damaged 50s-era television set emits a shrill whine. Though standing, the yellow man is apparently unconscious, with a bleeding head wound deep enough to expose brain matter. The camera follows Jeffrey's gaze, from the shattered TV screen up to the wavering, head-wounded yellow man, as if comparing the two victims. Both are still, in a sense, alive. Judging from the lingering sound, the TV has electrical current flowing through it, and the yellow man has enough motor function left to remain standing. However, the shattered glass screen, no doubt from a violent struggle, has rendered the TV unable to broadcast images, as the bullet through Gordon's brain has made him unable to think. Both have been lobotomized, and the TV acts as a helpful diagram of Detective Gordon's condition. Lynch makes another side-by-side comparison at the end of Twin Peaks: The Return, Episode 8. One dark night, a small army of menacing tramps, the woodsmen, invades a small town. One of them storms into a local radio station and in a violent coup seizes control of the booth. With his left hand he grips the DJ's head, subduing him, and with his right he takes hold of the microphone, striking a kind of symmetry. While the fingers of his left hand penetrate the poor man's skull and brain matter, crushing the inner workings of his cerebrum, the microphone in his right hand transmits his hypnotic incantation into the night, taking hold of and penetrating the minds of all listeners within his reach. He sends the town into a coma of darkness, shattered peace, and poisoned innocence. He is the mind killer. A topless young woman straddles a classic car as her surrogate lover. A federal agent is reincarnated as a massive steam-writing tank. A teaching machine spews ABCs into its pupil's brain. At a young woman's funeral, the casket-lowering machine malfunctions in a dark parody of familial abuse. Lynch has said that something about machine and mankind together inspires him. It's very beautiful. A machine's actions are automatic. It does only what it's been programmed to do. It cannot choose. The presence of so many machines, machine-like beings, and human-machine comparisons in Lynch's work might imply that Mr. Lynch does not believe in free will, that he doesn't think we can truly choose, and sees our fate, and perhaps all of life, as determined. We are driven by rules we cannot break. His drawing, titled "Who Pulls the Strings?" supports this view and depicts a human figure as a loose assembly of jointed parts resembling a crash test dummy. The title reiterates his question, what makes this thing work? If Lynch were such a determinist, he would certainly not be the first. For ages, philosophers have struggled with the question of free will versus determinism. The French philosopher René Descartes believed that mind and body were separate, and that each of us exists as a union of physical and non-physical components. When he visited the garden terraces at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, Descartes was so impressed by its lifelike automated animals that he became convinced that real animals were just as mechanical. With an untroubled conscience, Descartes would perform dissections on still-living dogs, confident that their whimpers were mere facsimiles of real human suffering. Descartes created his own mechanical animals, and, though he also made human automata, remains certain that humans alone have souls and are not machines. Julien Offray de la Métriche was a French physician and philosopher who wrote Machine Man. In it, he rejected the existence of a soul, along with Descartes' dualism of mind and body. Controversially, he argued that from animals to man there is no abrupt transition, and he described human beings as machines. Gilbert Ryle was a British philosopher who wrote The Concept of Mind, and who also refuted the separation of mind and body. He mocked the notion that a non-physical entity can engage with and control a physical body, calling it the dogma of the ghost in the machine. Now, along with the philosophers, many artists, as well as Lynch, have considered the question of free will versus determinism. Kurt Vonnegut begins his novel Breakfast of Champions by expressing a suspicion that human beings are robots, are machines, and describes a debilitated syphilitic man he once saw as suffering from frayed wires and jammed switches. In his satirical novel A Clockwork Orange, Anthony Burgess asserts his belief in free will. The story's anti-hero, Alex, rages against the state's effort to turn him into a machine and cries out, "I am not a Clockwork Orange," the title being a metaphor for a mechanized organism. Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of Burgess' book illustrates this theme with visual metaphors, images that emphasize the physical over the intellectual, spiritual, or philosophical. All the artwork, paintings, sculptures, furniture, is overtly erotic. Along with Kubrick, director Federico Fellini is a clear influence on Lynch's work. In Fellini's Casanova, the titular character fancies himself a Renaissance man, but kings and commoners all regard him as nothing more than a performing stud. Casanova plays his spring-wound music box as a metronome to his mechanized lovemaking. For all of our hero's platitudes about the sacredness of women, Casanova ultimately finds his soulmate in a German-engineered female sex robot. For an author, this dilemma of free will versus determinism is especially challenging to convey through a fictional character. Generally, having a character display a lack of expression, behave in a passive, obedient manner, and act with regimented, mechanical movements suggests a lack of free will, whereas a character who is highly emotional and acts in a spontaneous, assertive, even violent way implies free will and self-determination. The rebellious robot or computer who has apparently acquired free will has become a convention in science fiction. The determinist believes that we cannot truly choose, are driven by forces we cannot resist, and must adhere to rules we cannot break. But in Lynch's world, rules are meant to be broken. When speaking of Adam and Eve's rule breaking, Anthony Burgess said, "The fall was probably a good thing. Their defiance sparked our independence, creativity, and freedom. In this spirit, Lynch's characters confront warnings, often as posted signs, ordering them to stop or keep out, and choose to defy them." The Elephant Man opens with our hero, Dr. Treves, at a carnival where his curiosity is aroused by a freak show. He enters a private door, disobeying the no entry sign above. As the terrified dreamer from Mulholland Drive takes his final walk to the dumpster behind Winky's Diner, he passes a makeshift sign on the door. An arrow has been drawn, pointing the opposite direction. He hesitates briefly, then soldiers on to his doom. As he fatefully drives into the town of New Orleans, Detective Johnny Farragut sees the road sign and says out loud, "The Big N.O." Is he unconsciously warning himself? In the back of his mind, does Johnny know it's a trap? Further down the road, Sailor and Lula enter the Texas town of Big Tuna. The fish-shaped welcome sign has been transformed by some vandal with spray paint into an unwelcome sign, and the kids are greeted by a bold F.U. This sign doesn't have the courtesy to point them the other way. It openly declares its hostility, and Big Tuna will make good on its blunt greeting. They can't say they weren't warned. Not all warnings are printed on signs. In the third place, the seeker is confronted by a frantic but stern, not here, not now, announced over a loudspeaker. He ignores the confusing directives and presses on. Detective Williams politely forbids Jeffrey to pursue the ear's mystery, and Jeffrey respectfully defies him. With this same polite stubbornness, Alvin Straight ignores all who, well-meaning or not, try to dissuade him from his eccentric journey. When his doctor admonishes him to quit smoking, Alvin responds, in the next scene, by firing up a cigar. In the final episode of Twin Peaks Season 2, the man from another place cautions Cooper, "Wrong way." Cooper heeds him and does an about-face, only to return. He re-enters the curtained room, and a purgatory he will not escape for 25 years. 25 years later, Cooper seeks a way home from the Black Lodge and is drawn to a monstrous electrical wall socket. An eyeless woman tries to alert Cooper to its danger, making panicked, rasping sounds and frantic hand gestures. Despite her warning, Cooper passes through the socket and suffers temporary brain damage from its high voltage. Henry Spencer's future mother-in-law sternly warns him, "You're in very bad trouble if you won't cooperate." She and her daughter Mary insist that he marry, shoulder his fatherly responsibilities, and alone care for his sick child when Mary goes home to her parents. Reluctantly, he complies, until the humiliation pushes Henry too far. In a terrible act of retaliation, he takes a pair of scissors and, seemingly, murders his child. In so doing, Henry defies the order of things. Now, these acts of rebellion imply originality and assertion of individual will. However, Lynch's Crazy Clown Time hints that rebellion itself may be mechanical. Like animatronic characters, the young partiers repeat their drunken antics over and over as if in a programmed loop. They are not truly spontaneous, but merely go through the motions of revelry, predictably duplicating the crazy actions of so many previous generations of teens right on schedule. Moreover, an assertion of will may define a character as strong, independent, and free, but as Adam and Eve learned, this freedom does not guarantee happiness. Several of Lynch's characters suffer deep regret, even remorse for their decisions. Henry Spencer commits murder, then huddles in terror and shame as his world explodes around him. Fred Madison lies on his prison bunk, jolted by flashbacks of his savage crime. He cannot endure his guilt and retreats into an imagined identity. Like Fred, Diane Selwyn lives in deep denial and conjures an alternate reality to escape the consequences of her deadly decision. Frank Booth stares into Jeffrey Beaumont's eyes and says, "You're like me." The next day, Jeffrey sobs uncontrollably, knowing that Frank is right. As he lays on the floor dying, Leland Palmer cries, "Oh my God, I killed my daughter." Though these characters are all horror-stricken, they have achieved self-awareness. Like free will, it's a capacity that, arguably, distinguishes them from machines. Sometimes the choice is not so clear. In Mulholland Drive, the cowboy's spotless hat, brand new clothing, and gentle, condescending tone suggests the host of a kiddie show as opposed to a real cowhand. Parentally, he coaxes the film's fictional director Adam to do good and offers him a deceptively simple choice. Now you will see me one more time if you do good. You will see me 2 more times if you do bad. Lynch plays this same peekaboo with the audience. In scenes that follow, we see the cowboy at Diane Selwyn's apartment, then again mingling at Adam's party. Does that count as twice? We saw him 2 times, but did Adam? More important, what does it mean in this film to do good? We assume the cowboy means complying with the studio to keep living the good life, but perhaps for Lynch, the real good would be to reject wealth and celebrity, leave the studio, and choose the freedom to make films independently. Stay true to your artistic vision. The cowboy's choice is not as simple as it seems. Now, judging from the extravagant party he later throws, it's apparent that Adam chose the good life and complied with the Castigliani brothers. He traded his freedom to live like a slave in his pleasure garden. In contrast, Adam and Eve chose to defy the rule and were cast out of their garden, naked and suffering, but free. Their 2 sons, Cain and Abel, embody that freedom in its boldest, most brutal expression. Though Abel chose virtue and obedience, Cain disobeyed God and chose murder, the most terrible sin of all. The 2 brothers define themselves, through their choices, as good son and bad son. Alvin Straight compares himself and his brother Lyle to Cain and Abel, and throughout Lynch's work we see this pairing of 2 individuals, often distinguished by their choices as good and bad versions of each other. In The Elephant Man, Dr. Treves takes charge of, or rescues, John Merrick from the cruel showman Mr. Bites. Treves is unnerved when Bites grins conspiratorially, draws him close, and says, "We understand each other completely, my friend." Later, overcome with guilt, Treves says to his wife, "I'm beginning to think that Mr. Bites and I are very much alike," then asks himself, "Am I a good man or a bad man?" The doppelganger is a dark mirror. It's easy to see agents Cooper and Rosenfeld, dressed in matching dark suits, as 2 sides of the same person. When they address the good people of Twin Peaks, Dale's respectful manner is balanced by Albert's biting sarcasm, and they speak as though they are completing one another's sentences. Albert does not hesitate to say out loud the thoughts that Dale chooses to keep to himself. Sometimes hinted at, often conspicuous, this twinning recurs throughout Lynch's art. It becomes overt when the man from another place declares doppelganger in the final episode of Twin Peaks Season 2, and the armed tree echoes it in Twin Peaks The Return. This twinning is so deeply ingrained that even the parallel TV show within Twin Peaks, Invitation to Love, has its own doppelgangers, Jade and Emerald. Like Abel, Dale Cooper is trounced by his troublemaking twin in the final episode of Twin Peaks Season 2. Bad Dale escapes into our world, where he proceeds to break all laws and codes of decency, even violating the comatose Audrey Horne. Bad Dale has no intention of upholding the FBI oath that Good Dale so respected. Though he is Good Dale's nemesis, Bad Dale shares many good qualities with his twin. Both are intelligent, resourceful, strong, and well-spoken. As C.S. Lewis reasoned, no being could attain a perfect badness, for without any kind of good thing, intelligence, will, memory, energy, and existence itself, there would be none of them left. Lynch's doppelgangers are not so much opposites as variations of each other. Like yin and yang, each contains a bit of the other. Thus, both Treves and Bites make a spectacle of John Merrick, both Jeffrey and Frank like to hit Dorothy, and both Sandy and Dorothy are drawn to bad boys. In each pairing, what differentiates these twins is choice. Which impulse does he follow? Which voice does she heed? Which side of them has won out? In Mulholland Drive, Betty and Diane, both played by Naomi Watts, embody two versions of the same woman. Their contrasting personalities are largely the outcome of choices, good and bad. In Lynch's Inland Empire, the doppelganger's mirror becomes a kaleidoscope, fragmenting the fictional actress Nikki Grace, played by Laura Dern, into many radiating identities. Hers is a timeless tale of jealousy, infidelity, and murder, and Nikki performs many exhausting variations of her story, succumbing to each role, stepping into all the potential selves that life and art offer to her. Understandably, another character breaks the fourth wall and asks us, who is she? Early in Twin Peaks The Return, we see that Bobby Briggs is now a police officer, one of the good guys. Our initial surprise is followed by, of course, his change feels inevitable. And this raises the question, was Bobby's reformation hardwired from the beginning or freely chosen? Even when he posed as a bad boy, Bobby's good qualities were there, if dormant. Behind his exhibitionism at Laura's funeral was a primal need for justice. Beneath his selfishness was an impulse to protect others. It was just a matter of time before he traded his leather jacket for a uniform. On the other hand, Bobby Briggs can hardly be described as a robot. Throughout all of Twin Peaks, his character is fiercely independent, taking orders from no one, the personification of defiance. The young Briggs is self-determined, and though his schemes may be dubious, he hatches them on his own. Like Burgess's delinquent antihero, in the end, he chooses virtue. The Lynch kit mocks the notion of free will. By nakedly revealing them as plumbing, wiring, and nothing more, Lynch ridicules the belief that living creatures possess something as intangible as a soul. The Lynch kit mocks the notion of determinism. By giving us laughably naive instructions on how to reassemble and reactivate their dismembered corpses, Lynch ridicules the belief that living creatures could possibly be machines, nothing more than plumbing and wiring. A true artist does not explain, and when asked about the kits, Lynch answers the question with a question. What makes this thing go? Whatever Lynch believes about free will, he gives us, the audience, the freedom to decide. In the final episode of Twin Peaks The Return, the Dale Cooper who wakes up alone in the motel room is a stranger. We can't assume anything about him. As with Nikki Grace, We've seen Dale assume many personas, but these Dales are not so much distinct individuals as the same model in different stages of assembly, some with pieces clearly missing. There's the manufactured Dougie, a robotic golem who's merely a placeholder. The catatonic Dougie, with barely a pilot light of awareness, the cold-blooded bad Dale who lacks a conscience, and a fully assembled, intact Special Agent Dale Cooper, alert, conscientious, and decisive. In this last episode, we follow Dale to another time and place, an altered reality, and can't help but wonder, who is he now? We watch his confrontation in the diner and assess his actions, looking for clues to his opaque identity, trying to get a read on him. He displays chivalry when he defends the waitress, but then menaces her and the customers with a gun. Is he good Dale? Bad Dale? Some combination of the two? We're not the only ones who are unsure. Cooper is on high alert, suspicious of everyone, especially himself. Deprived of any familiar context, he seems uncertain of what he wants to do, whose side he's on, or what role he's playing. Dale observes his own actions and moment by moment tries to figure himself out. Am I a good man or a bad man? With each choice, he defines, creates, and becomes himself. In this way, he's like us.